You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Preseason football is here, and the Seattle Seahawks have a rejuvenated roster, but they're far from being a preseason favorite for the Super Bowl. So let's go back down memory lane. Let's remember some good times. And I'm talking about a Super Bowl win, a Super Bowl loss, the Legion of Boom, beast mode. In the early 2010s, the Seahawks were a football juggernaut. And now they're the subject of a new book called The Franchise, Seattle Seahawks, A Curated History of the Legion of Boom Era. Michael-Shawn Dugar is the author of that book, and he covers the Seahawks for The Athletic. Michael-Shawn, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on the book. I'm really enjoying reading it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the kind words. I'm very excited. My first ever book about my hometown team. So this is amazing.
There are a lot of parts of the organization that you write about that define this successful time in Seahawks history. Perhaps the most continuous presence would be Pete Carroll, chomping his gum, running up and down the sidelines. And you start your book with a chapter about the final moments when Pete is stepping away and saying, I'm not going to fight to remain the head coach anymore. Why did you want to start with that moment?
Yeah, because I think that you're correct. One of the reoccurring theme throughout is Pete's presence, and the Seahawks, as great as they were made in Pete's image. They talked like Pete. They believed the things that Pete believed in. The language was very important, and to see Pete, get up there, and that's like the first time I seen Pete cry. Just to be in the front row when that happened, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is the end." It selfishly really worked out well for me because I signed the book deal in September of 2023, and when I was starting writing the book, I was like, "Wow, where am I going to end this thing?" Because he's still the coach. So I'm like, "Okay, well, I don't really have a proper ending. We'll see how this goes." And then Pete gets fired. Like, well, there's my ending. And then I just kind of uh what's the guy who did Tenet? Christopher Nolan did, I guess, and just like use the beginning as my ending, or use the ending as my beginning, so to speak, and open the book with that because I just wanted people to feel something to start. And if you're of a certain age, like Pete Carroll stepping down means something to you. It's just like the farewell tour of your favorite rock band or something. It's just seeing the end. It's like, oh my goodness, this is real.
I mean, you talk about the culture. Can you get into it a little bit more about what did Pete encourage and grow in the locker room, in practices, that translated onto the field? What was the key to that cultural success as an organization?
First, I have to thank Doug Baldwin, Seahawks receiver, who wrote the forward for the book. And when we were brainstorming together about the forward and just whether I was the right guy to write the book, Doug he helped me feel better about it. He was like, "Dude, you're overthinking. You got this. You understand what to say. You understand our stories. You can do this." And I think his forward sets the tone for the culture part of it because Doug very well represented the culture. I think Doug, Richard Sherman, and Pete Carroll are kind of the three-headed monster for the culture of the team. Some players might have been better, have more success, been more famous, but the culture of it, is really Doug, Pete, and Sherm, I think, because they needed examples. Like Pete had a lot of principles, he outlined them really well. It helped that Pete already wrote a book about what he stood for, so it was very easy to have a framework to go off of. But one of the things he stood for was competing tooth and nail to the death, damn near. And Doug and Sherm just embodied that in a way that no other players ever did and probably ever will for Pete Carroll just because of their backgrounds and what football meant to them and what success meant to them and what failure could mean to them and their families and their livelihoods and just what they meant to the world. There's a lot going on there. So I think I got to give credit to Doug who described it. It's a family. We're going to compete. We're going to maybe look like we don't love each other at all. That's how hard we're competing. But we're doing that because we love each other. Like it is these almost competing emotions there. Like I'm gonna act like I hate you when we're out there doing this thing, but it's because I love you. And that can get real tricky if not conveyed very properly and reinforced at the right times. And Pete, I think, did that really well.
Because you write about how Sherman and Baldwin in practices would just be like, going at it and really, receiver and corner just like, putting it all out there in a practice and really fighting, as you say, tooth and nail, and then in the locker room it changes. And how do they maintain that ability to still be such close teammates and yet like have the culture at practice where it's all out there?
because they understood that they were about something bigger. And that's what really a family is about. And think about it. It's not just like trying to achieve whatever goal it is. It's because we're doing it for each other. And you got to know ultimately that I'm making you better Monday through Saturday, so that Sunday we're together, and I know you're gonna hold it down for me, and you're gonna give it your all, just like I'm giving my all. It really does remind me of the Seahawks too, in a lot of ways, of a family, of brothers in particular. I'm an only child, but I grew up with a lot of close friends who are like my brothers. I shout them out in the acknowledgments of the book. And it's almost like back in the day when you play fight in the backyard, with your brothers, man, even real fight, just so you guys know, if you go to the mall or you go to the park, you go to school, if we get into it, I know you're gonna have my back. We might not even win, but we're gonna do this together. If some bullies run up on us or whatever, like you just know that we done beat each other up in the backyard, so we know that we're gonna go to war together, out in the wherever we are, school, sidewalk, whatever, community center. Just if we run into trouble, we know we're doing this together because we gotta know we gotta come back home. I can't come back home and tell mom and dad that I let Johnny get jumped at the mall and I didn't, get down with him. We should both come home with black eyes, win or lose. And that's kind of the Seahawks were. They were like, we're gonna beat the snot out of each other Monday through Saturday. But that way we know when we play the Niners, we're gonna beat the snot out of them together, or we're gonna go down swinging, literally and figuratively. So I think that's what made it so powerful, and I think that's why a lot of guys resonated with it because that idea that I just described, that bond is very common. I think, especially among black guys of a certain age, to be honest, because I think I'm around Sherm's age, I'm around Doug's age, I'm 33. So a lot of that, like that notion of like, hey man, we gotta sharpen each other up to take care of each other so that if something goes down when we really gotta be side by side, I know that we got each other's back. And that's what made this all work. It's just channeled through football.
You quote Pete Carroll saying, I always said the guy that's making you practice your ass off is the guy you should love because he's making you the best you could be. And so you're referencing kind of the way people are sharpening each other at these Seahawks practices, especially during these early 2010s, kind of when everything is being set the table for this dynasty of the Legion of Boom era. Let's talk about John Schneider. The Seahawks just extended his contract through 2031, so they see the value of the GM as the long-term leader. Schneider comes into the organization around the same time Carroll does in 2010, and they build this incredible roster. Just in the first few years, they start laying the groundwork. Can you talk about that roster and what approach Schneider and Carroll took to build it?
Yeah, I think they both benefited from having been fired before, having worked in other organizations before, and saw the good and bad. I think that it kind of reminds me of people when they grow up. You grow up with two good parents. You see what being a good parent looks like. You see what to do. You see a good example. You grow up with bad parents. You say, "Oh, I know what not to do when I become a parent." It kind of works. You're learning either way, and I think John and Pete really benefited from that. How to take care of the players, how to take care of their assistant coaches, how to empower them. I thought that was really important. They were in sync in that way because they had seen it done correctly and they had seen what they felt was it done poorly. And I think it's obviously go find big, strong, fast guys. Like that's not unique to the Seahawks, but I feel like what they were looking for upstairs, like between the ears, was very important. They just wanted a certain type of attitude. And it kind of lucked into the defensive part. They didn't think that Cam Chancellor would be who he is, or they would have took him in the second round instead of the fifth, right? The same thing with Richard Sherman. They took him in the fifth round because they thought he was worth a fifth round pick. If they knew he'd be a Hall of Famer, he'd have been their first pick. So some of the draft is just a dice roll. But I think why it worked is Pete and John, despite their age gaps, there's like a 20-ish year gap between the two. They just saw running an organization the same way. And I think that faded a little bit, which is why John's still here and Pete's in Vegas now. But for a while there, they just saw it the same. Like we have to treat these guys a certain way. We got to get a certain type of alpha male guy. They also believed in, which is very important, rolling the dice on guys who other teams don't want for like reasons that are very justified by that team. Like it makes sense why Buffalo by the end was willing to get rid of Marshawn Lynch. It had just run its course. It makes, guys like Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill. There was a lot of guys who weren't drafted by the Seahawks who came in and were dominant and effective right away because Pete and John saw like them worth taking a risk on. And that was very important because not everybody was doing that. You get a guy, Marshawn had a lot of run-ins with the law. He wasn't everyone's cup of tea. He kind of is now, but 2010 Marshawn Lynch was not like this movie star, personable, interviewing Dr. Fauci type of, charismatic figure. He was a gold teeth having, dreadlock wearing, slang talking guy from Oakland. And that wasn't everybody's cup of tea. So I think the way that John and Pete saw things was very important because they saw it together. They saw take care of the players, take care of the people who work for us. I thought that was the most fascinating thing I learned about John was just when in reporting for this book was how much John cared about making the guys who worked under him feel like they mattered. And I think that is also through lived experience. Being an NFL scout, that's an awful job. You don't make no bread. You over here, you're not flying around in great places scouting these players. Go look at where all the college towns that kids come from. You're in Tuscaloosa and all these like middle of nowhere SEC towns like that are hard to get to. No direct flights. You're away from your family for the fall. And you're not making great money. And John understood that because he came up being a scout. So he's like, how do I empower my scouts to feel like they're part of this machine and not in a way that's just like a means to an end, like a transactional way. Treat them like they matter. And Pete did the same thing for his coaches and his players. So then John and Pete, the short version is understood the people part really well, really, really, really well. And I think that is why it worked. I don't think they knew football better than the rest of the league for half a decade. I think they understood how to get the best out of people better than the league for about half a decade.
So let's talk about the Legion of Boom. I mean, we've gotten into some of the players here. The secondary was just wild. Like Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. These are defining generational, like defensive players. You write that no defense has been the stingiest on the scoreboard for 4 years in a row since the Eisenhower administration, for goodness sake. But let's talk about how it came together and what the secret sauce was, because the Seahawks have had their defensive coaches now poached to other teams around the league to try to set something like the Legion of Boom up. Nobody's been that successful. Nobody's been able to do what the Seahawks did in the 2010s. What did the Hawks have that other teams don't?
Yeah, I think they had the size, right? Because Brandon Brown is about 6'3", Sherman's about 6'3". But I really think again it was the makeup of the guys, particularly Brandon, because Brandon's a very much there's a certain type of football player or just athlete in general that is playing that sport at a high level because they know they can't go back to wherever they're from because it's just not good for them. Whether that's the hometown, a family situation, they're gonna make it because they just can't go back. Brandon was a can't go back type of guy. He was not gonna go back to California. And you see what happened when he did. He ends up in prison, when he goes back because he didn't have that outlet. So I think his size was very important. And there's a conversation that Sherman and BB have, that one of their first times meeting each other, that Sherman recalled to me years ago. He was just like, I sat down next to him at lunch. Nobody else would sit down next to him. And he told me, he said, they brought us here to put our hands on people. So let's do it. And then it was little conversations like that, a feeling of shared purpose. They got to bond together. And I bring up BB, that's important. He had that relationship with Sherm right away. They played the same position. Cam and Earl in the same draft class. They were roommates when they got drafted in 2010. So right there, boom, we're all locked in. We're all around the same age. They were all single at the time, no kids. It was just they were just growing together like kids on a sitcom. You just watch them grow in front of you together. So that was a huge part of it. They played basketball at LA Fitness. They went to Lake Chelan and were on boats. They were at the clubs together. They just did everything in the off season. They went to each other's hometowns and they went to Miami to hang out and they knew each other and they could play fast because they knew, okay, I know why he's doing this. Not because we watched a bunch of film together necessarily, which they did. It was like, oh, we done already talked about this in Miami, or we done already talked about this at the LA Fitness playing hoops. They just had a chemistry with one another that no one else could replicate. That's why you saw when a Dan Quinn left the team, assistant coach. A Ken Norton Jr. left the staff. Gus Bradley left the staff. And they didn't just go recreate the Legion of Boom in Jacksonville, in Vegas, or with the Raiders when Ken Norton left, or in Atlanta when Dan Quinn left. Because they didn't have Earl. And they didn't have Earl's relationship with Cam. They didn't have Sherm, and they didn't have Sherm's relationship with BB or even Byron Maxwell or Jeremy Lane. So schematically, they were just playing a good coverage. Cover three is great, but everybody can run a cover three. You know, I can put me, you, and nine other people from KUOW out there. We can run
Let's
cover
do
three. I could
this.
teach all you guys to
Yeah.
play cover three, but we're not gonna have the same effect unless we really love each other and know each other's why. But it really was, I think, that these guys were just wired differently and they were together in a way that we'll never see again. We'll never see a team lead the league in scoring defense 4 years in a row. I feel very confident saying that. That was a truly generational time period, and it went beyond just what type of coverage they were running.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about the offense. I mean, Russell Wilson is a defining figure of the era. He's also a controversial figure of the era. I mean, a lot of folks will know the mantra, let Russ cook, and there's a lot of games that you can point to say, that's what the Hawks did, and they came out on top. At times that did work, like focus on the passing game. At others, it didn't. Now we see that John Schneider decided to deal Russell Wilson, maybe as a surprise to some fans, but it turned out to be a good move. What do you make of Wilson's tenure and why he was controversial, especially in the locker room in some ways?
Yeah, it's Russ was is complicated, doesn't even do it. I gotta look up another word to describe it because there's a lot going on with Russ's place in the locker room because he's the quarterback. So he was kind of the last thing that you need. You can have the greatest defense in the world, but you need someone who can spin the ball. So he kind of completed it all in that way. But his existence and the way he was wired and how Pete treated him differently than the other guys ultimately brought the house down. It was hanging on by a thread before Super Bowl 49, and then Russ did like the worst possible thing you could probably do in football is throw an interception on the 1 yard line with the Super Bowl on the line. It just really doesn't get worse than that in football. I think it's even worse than like missing a kick. It's just
Okay,
so bad.
time out because we got to play the audio right now because we, of course, have it queued up.
Play clock at 5. Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler.
The loss of the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Why didn't he just deal it to Marshawn? Why? Why didn't we just deal it and run it? We were right there.
It was talking to Daryl Bevel for this book was so fascinating, because I thought when I reached out, he was on the Dolphins staff at the time. I thought he would decline and didn't want to talk about it because it is just such a brutal moment. We talked for like 30, 40 minutes. Like he gave me extra time. He wanted to make it very clear that he stood by the call. Like that is something he was very confident in. He said the call was fine. It's a good play. Russ has options. I break down all the schematics of the play in the book, and he just said we didn't execute. Very coach speak, but he believes it. He really does believe it, and I think that though is important because his guys are like, that's a bunch of BS, coach. We should have given it to Marshawn Lynch. The conspiracy theories birthed from that really hurt Bev. In his mind, he's like, I went to war with you guys every day. We won a Super Bowl together. And you think I give a damn about that in this moment? That was a thing he stressed as well. Like Mike, he was like, Mike, I just can't believe these guys would think that I would care about who would win MVP and like want to call a play with that on my mind. He just couldn't fathom that. So yeah,
But it actually affected the relationship. So offensive coordinator Daryl Bevel saying it affected his relationship with the players because of that one call.
I think it just hurt him. I don't know if it affected the relationship per se, but I do think it affected the relationship with the rest of the players and Pete. Like I said, Pete kind of taught them to believe a certain thing and behave a certain way. And how Pete let Russ operate just ran counter to that. And they were like, on top of that, we don't even like this guy. We don't like this guy. We don't like how he talked. We don't like that he's not one of us. He just didn't like him. So on top of Pete treating him a different way, like you couldn't berate Russell the same way you could, like we are talking about Doug and Sherm. You couldn't do that with Russell. You didn't. Pete didn't want you to, and he made that very clear to those guys, and they didn't like that. They didn't like it. So when Pete threw the ball and told Bev, we're gonna have to throw it once, at least once, for the time on the clock in the Super Bowl. Those guys viewed that as an act of betrayal. Almost. It was like, Pete, you told us a thing. You told us always compete, run the ball, play good defense, we'll be great. We just won the Super Bowl by 35 points doing that. And then we get right back there, and you guys want to get cute and run a play we've never even run in a game before with the ball in the hands of a guy we don't even like. It broke everything. It broke everything right then. It was broken right then.
Really quick before you go, just on the Seahawks this year, we're obviously in preseason now. It was weird to see Pete Carroll back in town with the Raiders. Last season was that transition period with the new Mike Macdonald era. The Seahawks had a winning record, but missed the playoffs at 10-7. What are you watching for in the second year of the Mike Macdonald era? And do you think that these Seahawks are a playoff team?
Yeah, I'm looking for an identity because that was the thing. Reporting on this book while watching Mike Macdonald, I just kind of knew what to look for because I saw it work. I saw that Seahawks offense in particular had just such an identity. It was Marshawn Lynch. It was running the ball a certain style of way. And they knew that, which is why when things got rocky, they could come back to center. They had their foundation. It was so clearly defined. And it was just walking through the building with dreadlocks. Like you could just see it. Like, hey, if we lose our way for a game or so, a couple games, we know that we know what to come back to. It's number 24 over there. And they had that. And that's why for a while there, Pete's teams didn't lose multiple games in a row that often. They didn't lose by more than like 10 points for like 60 games straight. Like they just fought tooth and nail to the end because they knew who they were. You could come back to that foundation in game, in between games. Like it was very strong. That was on offense. On defense, they had the same thing. But I think that knowing each other's whys and stuff was very important. Like, know why Richard Sherman's doing this. Know why KJ Wright is like this. Know why Michael Bennett behaves the way he does. Wears the shoulder pads he does the sack dance he does. It's not just because he's begging for attention. That's who Mike is. Type of guy who, when he got in trouble, his mom would make him read the encyclopedia. Like a dude like that is never going to bite his tongue. So I think that was important on defense, and I'm looking for that now. I'm looking for, does a Julian Love, who's a safety for the Seahawks now, does he know what makes Devin Witherspoon tick? Has he met Devin Witherspoon's family or his girl or his kids, or whatever? Do they bond in that way? Because that's what's going to matter. Because football's it's long, it hurts. By week 9, everybody's in the training room getting something, tape, a shot, a pill that's regulated by the NFL, something to get you out there. And what got those guys out there back in the day was, I love this dude next to me. I know if I got to get a Toradol shot before every game to go out there and risk it all, I know if he needs one, he'll get one too because he's doing it for me. And so I'm looking for that. Everyone's big, strong, fast in the NFL. Everyone tackles. Everyone, can catch. But what's going to set you apart and maintain consistency is consistency within the people on the field. So I think that's brewing on defense really well. I'm actually high on the Seahawks defense. I think it could be one of the best in the league. I really do. The offense, I'm still learning. They got a new coordinator, new quarterback, new receivers, new tight ends, a lot new. So I don't think they're a playoff team unless these things I'm talking about come together. It'll be like, do they have an identity? What is it? Can they lean on it in tough times on both sides of the ball? Because I think Mike Macdonald has established the culture. He's got his sayings just like Pete. Chasing edges is the new version of always compete. 12 as one is the togetherness that I'm talking about. Principles are set in stone, methods are adjustable. That's another Mike Macdonaldism. He's got his way. He's got it. He knows who he is. He didn't have to go take a year off and call John Wooden like Pete did in 2000. He just kind of found himself, and he still finding himself to a certain extent. He's only 38. But I'm just looking for them to find a culture and identity because I don't think you can win a championship without that.
Michael-Shawn Dugar is a reporter for The Athletic and author of the really fun new book, especially if you are at all nostalgic for the era of the Legion of Boom. The franchise, Seattle Seahawks, A Curated History of the Legion of Boom Era is the book. It's out today, and Michael-Shawn, you're going to be at Third Place Books in Seward Park tonight at 7, and then at Elliott Bay Books on Monday, August 25th, talking about the book. So if folks want to find out more, I'm assuming they can follow you. How do they find out more about where you're going to be and what to know about the book?
Yeah, I'm on all of the apps of the millennials. I'm not full on Gen Zer yet. So I'm on Instagram at Dugar Mike. I'm on X, Twitter, whatever, at Mike Dugar, MikeDugar. I'm also on Blue Sky as well, at the same handle. I try to keep it consistent. I'm trying to update on all those platforms. But yeah, Third Place Books tonight is 7. We talking about the book. Maybe grab a beer with me. Let's just chop it up. I'll be signing books as well. So yeah, I'm really excited. I hope people. I just can't wait for people to read it. That's the thing. I worked on this book for a couple years. I lost a lot of sleep, writing it. A lot of coffee. Shout out to my parents for buying me a Keurig during this. So I just really want people to just experience, even if they don't like it. Just read it and tell me what you think. I just can't wait for that. So I'm really happy. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.